Now, one of the things that I want to get into is the messaging, the proposals, and the implementation behind all of these crime-fighting endeavors or lack thereof, because I do think that there's a lot to be had from here, and there should be a lot of questions that you, the public, should be asking, because we do need to hold the authorities to account or figure out how to replace them in the next election if it is determined that they need to be replaced. That's up to you, the individual voter. Now, the police have apparently sent a list of 17 topics to One Keith Scotland. Rather, not the police, but the TNT Police Service Social and Welfare Association, the TTPSSWA. One would hope maybe, I don't know, that is a big, anyway. The list of 17 things starts off with procurement legislation's impact on TTPS operations, medical insurance for officers, their pension plan, the absorption of SRPs, or working alongside SRPs, the regulation of SRPs, recognition status for municipal officers, issues related to recruitment of officers, lack of physical resources, that's something from since Double G's tenure, issues with COVID allowances, because payments and grants and subsidies tend to be late, or the press release on them tends to be on time. The actual payments tend to be late. A need for international leadership training courses, houses for police officers, state land for housing, state land for agriculture, development of an outdoor shooting range, state-of-the-art medical facilities in Tobago, to host and facilitate discussions with stakeholders in the criminal justice system, and to facilitate forums for brainstorming and strategizing with law enforcement personnel. Well, that last one is purely, I think, on the executive, unless it's about legislative changes. Now, all of these issues, some of these things, they're not necessarily pertinent to law enforcement, but some of them are, like international training, like an outdoor shooting range, like what about the status of municipal police and SRPs and regulation for SRPs. These things do matter. Now, let's go down the line to point to some of the messaging from our leadership. Now, of course, the Minister of National Security, he will probably be one of the things he will be most famous for saying now is the fact that it's not his job to have a crime plan. I mean, technically, it's not his job to have a police crime plan or a crime plan for the police per se, but it is his job to have an overall crime plan, either him or the head of the National Security Council. And one would think that it starts with him technically. But more recently, he has lamented the fact that drugs have become more readily available. And he said 2 people have come forward to him and say it's not even about them buying drugs, it's about people offering it to them for free. Hard drugs, synthetic, chemically produced drugs. And then on top of the fact, he's pointing out that marijuana sales have not been dented whatsoever. Illegal revenue, illegal proceeds from marijuana sales are going strong. We did a thing to try to stop this thing and it didn't work. That's the implications of what he said. And it seems as though he has committed to one more thing. We're committed to stop the violence, hasn't been stopped. Just look at the front page of at least one of the local papers today. Brutal murder I honestly don't want to get into because I just can't deal with another brutal murder. But the government is committed to removing drugs from the streets of Trinidad and Tobago. Good luck with that. If you're not going to actually arrest the people in charge of the drug trade, then that's just not going to happen. That's basically where that statement comes down to. So I do wonder to what extent does the Minister of National Security know he is essentially giving us supreme lip service, because there are greater implications with regards to who the drug lords are and where the money goes and who receives some of said money, and I will leave that there. Let's move on to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister had something very interesting to say, still out of his press conference from Thursday. And it's the kind of messaging that I would say is incomplete, but because it's incomplete, it's disappointing. And people will say, oh, he's blaming families. Well, to some extent, he is. Crime starts at home. It starts at home. That's the quote. Crime in brackets, that's the reporting based on the context of the conversation I was having. Then it gets into the community, then it gets out there as a nation. It starts at home. That's nice. That's incomplete. Because there are certain communities where it's an uphill battle for parents. And that's assuming they're not in a single parent situation in the first place, and then assuming that their income of their one job is good enough that they don't need to have two jobs. So there are a lot of things. It's very interesting how crime hotspots tend to be areas with lower incomes, right? St. Clair is not a hotbed of gang activity from the local people living there. You know, they don't have, you know, street violence because one block is encroaching on the turf of another block in St. Clair or West Moorings. Who are the West Mooring gangs? What about the Gulfview gangs in South? You know, those who control the mall and those who control the warehouses. Is this a thing? No, richer communities don't tend to have street gangs. So there's the first clue. So does it all start at home? Well, geographically, yes, it starts at home. Because a lot of these gangsters are living in the areas where crime starts. But the influence is not just because of a lack of guidance opening them up to bad influences. Because we've already had multiple stories throughout the last year of young men not wanting to be involved, not wanting to necessarily give in to extortion, not wanting to associate themselves with criminals from their neighborhood, being killed. They try to get out. One could argue that the correct lessons came down either from the parents, from the teachers, from other relatives, from the village, whatever is left of the village, and they died. So I would applaud the Prime Minister for his wonderfully tone-deaf message, because he's not entirely wrong. Parenting does have a role to play, but to say that it starts from there, I don't think that what we see now starts from there. I think what we see now starts from the fact that the National Security Council cannot account to our porous border situation. Let's move on, because the opposition leader, she has a very consistent message. Stand your ground. That's basically it. The UNC government will give you the legal firearms and legislation to level the field and fight back against vicious criminals. That's the promise of the UNC. Now, technically speaking, it's already legal to own a firearm and to fight back against vicious criminals. So I'm not entirely sure what new legislation is needed. You might want to modify things with regards to the process of getting out FULs, but you don't, as far as I'm aware, don't actually need a new legislation to allow people to fight back. Self-defense is already a thing, legally, not just, you know, societal, you know, common belief. So what else is the UNC promising? I'm not entirely sure, because we don't get enough reporting on their 37 pieces of anti-crime legislation. Sorry, they supported 37 pieces of anti-crime legislation. But that doesn't necessarily tell us what it is that they intend to do besides promising us something that technically we already have. It's just not being done quickly enough on the bureaucratic end. Not on the legislative end, unless there's some big loophole that exists already. But private FULs exist already. People are applying for them to get them already because it's legal to do so, to defend themselves. We just have, now, maybe what the opposition leader should be saying is, I will reverse the informal policy of this Rowley-led administration with regards to persecuting FUL holders. Assuming that that's what the informal policy is, we're not entirely sure. We just know that when Judge Frank Sipasad kind of scolded the commissioner, the Prime Minister said, you can't speak our policy. What is the policy? But like I said, not much, just a one-track mind here from the opposition leader. Now let's go on to the political leader of Hope, someone who has been on this show, unlike the past two political leaders, by the way, and the Minister of National Security. although not in his capacity as political leader of Hope. He has offered several steps with regards to various things like the criminal justice system. They have published it in the press law enforcement reform. Some of these things have been tried before, maybe not to the extent that they're proposing them. That might be the main thing. We don't necessarily have all the details, but things to try to improve the flow of the criminal justice system. I do think that some of it might not work as advertised. Some of it might be a good thing, like a 24-hour gun court, although at a practical level, I don't know how that will work. Trying to speed up trials, I get it. Enhancing the prosecutorial system to benefit from a unified digital platform. That would be a good idea if you could pull it off. Procurement is going to make all of these things more complicated than they were. That's what it seems like. Also, with regards to stopping firearms and drug smuggling coming in, proposing to lease X-ray scanners, working with CARICOM impacts and international allies to apprehend traffickers, radar and drone surveillance, decriminalization of marijuana, accompanied by extensive long-term drug abuse education. Apparently, one of the programs from the 80s or 90s in the States actually did work. Those PSA programs, I'm not sure if it was DARE or all those public service things about drugs, this is your brain on drugs and it's scrambled the egg, things like that actually did work for some of the young people in North America. We don't really have anything that creative down here, and it doesn't get distributed enough, I would argue. But the decriminalization of marijuana, I know Mr. San Fernando, he's probably looking at this one, with panic in his eyes. But I would say this again, we are in a poor middle ground where we experience the bad aspects of criminalization and decriminalization because we're in a compromised center. So we either go all the way or we go back to what it was. That's my opinion. That's an oversimplification, but that's more or less just to put it forward quickly. And then they have law enforcement reforms. Career advancement from within the TTPS, including the ability to recruit professional managers and officers to TTPS upper ranks based on merit. Although I do wonder if that also includes professional managers from outside the TTPS. Or will they have to come from within? Will they have like a separate parallel track for non-officers to do administrative work? I don't even know if this proposal goes that far. Things like a tactical police squad to investigate, arrest, and charge offenders with unlicensed firearms, basically like a mini ATF in the TTPS. Access to proper electronic databases for DNA and fingerprints, databases for that, and things like a database of car ownership and home ownership should be accessible by the police. But apparently it's not. That's why the police have to have their own exercises. It's crazy. That's why you have to fill out forms, apparently, by the police, because, all of the various government ministries that's supposed to be doing these things somehow are not able to do these things and then tie it back to a central database that could be accessible by the police. It should not be that hard, and yet it is. Legislation to include the Army as a separate law enforcement arm. That one, I am kind of dubious about that one. But here's the point that I want to make out of all of that. Look at what Mr. Hammersmith is presenting. He's presenting a lot of ideas, some of which is in line with what the government has tried to do. Maybe he's saying that it needs to go further, some of which I have not heard any other politician bring forward. Then compare and contrast that to, well, stand your ground law. You can stand your ground. That is technically already a thing. Or the Prime Minister's, well, it starts from the family. Yeah, I'm pretty sure blaming parents now is not going to stop the early to mid-20 gangsters with automatic rifles who are shooting up the place. I think at this point, to stop them, we can't just blame their parents and somehow tell these 50 and 60-year-olds, go find your child who has guns, take your slipper off your foot, and spank him, and then crime will be solved. What we get is a lot of things about why this is not our fault, and stand your ground laws, you know what it does? It kind of passes the buck off onto you. I can't solve crime, so I'll get you to defend yourself, right? Or I can't solve crime, so I'll blame families. We're not necessarily seeing new ideas, new thoughts, new strategies come into the equation. One could say a lot of what Mr. Hammersmith said here is nothing that innovative. But you know what? When you grade it on a curve and you compare it to the messaging coming out from other quarters, A for effort, you know, it's like it's the best of what's there. And I actually think it's at least a reasonable place to start. If you want to discount half of these things, you consider it, weigh the pros and cons, then discard it. Fine, and move on. Okay, what else could we come up with after the fact? But generally speaking, what we get is a lot of recycling of old ideas, recycling of old messaging, and we're kind of left in this mess. So are we serious about our country in the next general? I'm not saying that Hope has to win the election if we're serious. I'm saying that I don't want to see low voter turnout and then the vast majority of people just vote either the PNM and the UNC, similar to what we've seen in the last 2 to 3 to 4 elections. Because that just tells me that the vast majority of the undecided voters did not care. Did not care enough to even come out to vote. Even if it is to vote for the PNM and UNC, at the very least, participate and make a choice. Don't just leave it up to other people. And then want to apply for your American visa because, oh, things got so bad down here. I don't know how things got so bad. Well, maybe a lack of participation did not help the situation. But in the meantime, the relevant authorities need to do something with the guys with guns because you can't put that on the citizens. And that's what the parliamentarians essentially want to do to you. Do you accept that? I'll leave that up to you. You could call in, you could tell me I'm totally wrong, or you could give me an answer to that question. But there's a lot that I wanted to say this morning. Never have enough time. There's even some stories from last week that I might have to just let go. But we have the ASP here with us. He's been waiting. So we're going to switch gears slightly and talk to him about more concerns coming from the TTPS, concerns which should be highlighted. Stay tuned to Talking About on WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
I'm back here on Talk About WSN, the Content Capital Show. Michael Small here, once again joined, as we are every Monday, by TTPS Media Ambassador Acting ASP Ashraf Ali. Good morning, sir.
Good morning,
Still
Sean.
acting? Didn't promote you yet? Didn't confirm that appointment?
Not as yet, sir.
All right, I will refrain from commenting further. Don't want to get the ASP in trouble. One thing I do want to mention before we start with the concerns that the service has. It happened again, Facebook Marketplace, robbery, this time gun violence. This was one of the stories that I wanted to highlight from since Friday. I believe that the police did, kudos to them, catch the armed bandit. He opened fire on the victim's car with a rifle, right? The victims at the very least had the wherewithal to escape, but not before the driver, the mother, was shot. And I'm not entirely sure if we're going to update on her medical condition. She was critical at the time of the press release on Friday. But it's just one more of those things where, you know, Facebook Marketplace strikes again. Kudos to the police for at least catching a suspect in this case so quickly.
Well, it is positive on one side, but sadly on the other side is that persons are still not heeding the messages when it comes to these things, Facebook Marketplace. And it's not to criticize the platform, but users of the platform, both buyers and sellers, persons use these opportunities to use these type of platforms to lure people into criminal
because in the past,
targets.
It might have been a classified ad.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So they have
any papers.
They are using, and now we have to look at how the criminal elements utilize opportunities to cause crime. They have been using any opportunity they can create in any environment where they can get the opportunity to commit a crime.
I have a question, because in a sane world, this should be very alarming that someone who decided, I'm going to rob someone of their cash and their vehicle, I'm going to have a rifle, and what is supposed to be an attempted robbery charge, I'm going to escalate it to basically an attempted murder charge, I would assume, is put on the table after you hit someone and leave them in critical condition.
Yes.
And this type of escalation, right? It's not as though the criminal, you know, they fought back against the criminal and shot the criminal. I don't know if she tried to run him over. Probably not. At least don't have reports on that. But I'm wondering now more and more where people do need to be a bit wary, or more wary than even ever before in these sorts of confrontations, because it seems as though the criminals are willing to go from 0 to 60 and have zero regard of the consequences. Is that alarming to the police service? Because in the past, professional criminals will not make this decision. Why put a murder charge on top of yourself unnecessarily for no gain?
Well, you see, that is the challenge we continue to face, because the mindset of the current individuals who are involved in crime activities at this point in time is not they don't have a foreseeable future.
Yeah.
It's today for today.
Yeah.
All right, they live today for today. And there's a lot of things that would have caused that, or that mindset to be developed within those individuals. Because let's be real, they didn't born a criminal. They were children, and they would have, some may have gone to school, some may have fallen out of the educational system because they may not have been fully academically inclined. There were no other social programs for them to get involved. They in the community themselves has a cycle in the community that they are part of. And today we are reaping, unfortunately, we're not reaping the benefits of, I would say when I reap the benefits of something,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be a positive benefit.
Yeah.
But now we are reaping the negative benefits of this, right? And how do we change that? Is that we can't change that for now. Whatever we do now, we have to look at it from the future perspective, because it's a change the children of the future, not now.
Right.
Everything that we are doing now cannot be for immediate change, because it has already been entrenched. So sometimes it's challenging. It is extremely challenging, because you have a lot of forces trying to change today for today. And those individuals have been acclimatized into that environment over a number of years, and a lot of different societal issues affect those individuals, and they are now where they are at this point in time. And that brings us to the topic today, where we have the August vacation coming out.
Yeah.
We have exams, children coming out of exams. Children, some will be successful, some will not be successful. And the issue is, how do we continue being proper parents and parental support to these children? Not everyone in our society could be doctors and lawyers and have get the best, go to the #1 school for your first choice. You will have failures. You will have children who will not succeed. They will be disenfranchised, they will be sad, they will be, but how do parents support your child? And we have evidence to support that sometimes that parents believe that their child their child's success depends or reflects on them.
Right.
And if their child doesn't succeed, they don't succeed. That is you living your child's dream, not your dream.
Well, to some extent, I do ascribe this the philosophy that when the child is successful, the child is great. When the child has failed, it's the parents' fault. Because to some extent, right, success could mean a lot of different things, but failure tends to boil down to very few scenarios, which could have various details, but it all comes down to the inability of the individual to become a productive member of society. Don't have to be rich. Just needs to be able to pay his bills and survive in whatever facet he deems acceptable enough.
And in both spheres, as I was mentioning earlier, where crimes happen in different communities, and the type of crimes happening in different communities is different. But what is important, what is standard, is that the successes and failures of children in each of the community remains the same. A child in a society, in a community, or let me use a household, who has success in terms of they would have invested a lot in the child and all of that. If that child fails, that pressure is much more on that. That child feels there's a lot of pressure, and this is where we have children may do things or rebel. Some rebel to the extent that suicide is an avenue.
And that's always been an issue, yes.
And we have evidence that children over the years would have committed suicide.
Yes.
And we
even
ask the question,
back to my time, maybe even your time.
yes, and we ask the question why. And the big question is why. And there was a lot of different factors. We never knew that he or she was going through this, and what caused this and what caused this. It's always a question about what afterwards.
I know of one very high-performing student who was 2 years above me, and the rumor was, I can't confirm this, was that there were concerns that he was so one-track minded when he was in school that once he went to university and there was more freedom, things may or may not have fell off the rails a little bit.
Yes.
Because he was not prepared to the wider experiences. He was just, study, academic success, study, and then now the world is not so linear. So, and ironically, I think it's not so straightforward to say this is completely correct and this is completely wrong, because education is not just about, academic success, but it's also preparing you to be an adult. And when society, parents, school, the village fails in that, it could have just as bad circumstances as when they have academic failings.
So true. So we have a grading system. I mean, I'm not here to discuss the grading system. That's not my field. But I'm just looking at it from this perspective. We have choices. First choice, second choice, third choice, and even fourth choice. What is the purpose of the choices? The choices are there because you may not get your first. You may get your second. You may get your third. May get your fourth. The question here is, how do parents treat with a child who everybody wants the first choice, but if it doesn't get the first choice, does it mean that that child is no longer no support for that child, and that child is less than the child? Why you blame the child for that for? Because there's a lot of things that goes through when you go to an exam and come out of an exam, how a person behaves in an exam, right? But the thing about it is parental support. Supporting a child not only in the success time, when they're having success and achieve the objectives, but if they fail, or they didn't achieve the first objective, how do you support your child during that period?
Well, so there's a couple of things, because I do think education is the big issue. To be fair, last week I went on your record. I think the biggest failure of national security is the border, but I'll just leave that there. You don't have to comment on that. But I think that is also, to some extent, something that I don't think a lot of people really realize. But I think education is one of the big social issues that we have, one that is sorely underestimated by the wider society. Crime is merely one of the consequences of it. One of the things is that, and I had Judith DeVertal here to speak, because she does East Port of Spain school, where her philosophy is to tailor the education based on the needs of the child. We have basically a one-size-fits-all policy, whether the Ministry of Education proactively designed it that way or not. That's what we have. So some of the times when a child fails, it's not because the child is dumb, right? I mean, that and all is a very subjective thing to say. But it's because, well, the system didn't work for the child, and under a different system, they might have excelled, whereas some of those that are excelling now might fail. But then the other thing is, and I think a lot of it comes back to the intention of the parents. It's not just enough to invest in the child, but why are you investing? Is it like this desperation, we're investing in you to succeed, and we're all counting on you, and if you fail, then you're stupid. Then we wasted our time. I think it goes back into, if you're investing in your child to make them believe in themselves, you can't succeed. You just have to try and not give up. Don't expect to never fail, but don't give up. Invest in yourself, your child, from small. Understand these positive messages, as opposed to, well, then when they fail, the system is against us, this is against us, you stupid, whatever. Instead of getting the child to believe in themselves, they have all of these negative things in their head, and then we're surprised when, first sign of adversity and it's all kaput. Well, because statistically, not everybody's getting in the first choice.
Obviously not, right? And some may not even get in the second choice.
Statistically, yes, it's right? The majority is going to filter down.
But if we have to look at it from that perspective, and parenting on the whole, and the sad thing about parental support that we see now is that, or I should say sometimes a lack of support.
Yeah.
Right? Because they too were not given that parental support, so they don't know how to give that support.
Yeah.
So there's a cycle in play that
the negative behavior is repeated.
Yes. So there's the cycle in play, and law enforcement is caught in the middle of it.
Yes.
Right?
Because then it could include things like sexual abuse and assault,
and a lot of
emotional abuse, physical abuse,
and psychological abuse that is going on there, that they react to authoritative figures in a different manner, and the authoritative figure sometimes is the police.
Now, right, because their experience with authoritative figures, whether their parents, the community, or teachers, have been negative, then it's going to translate.
And it'll spill off.
But here's a question, though. This might be anecdotal. I know we have an issue with data in this country, but how many criminals do you know of, right? Or how much do you think this is true, where a lot of them, their family history, yes, you're going to have the ones who the parents did everything right and they still, for whatever reason, fell into a bad crowd. But how many of them have a bad history? Abuse in their home life, not getting a fair shake, bad teachers, rough community, not a lot of guidance, not a lot of support. Like these things all tend to, in various combinations, add up and give us what we get now.
Without statistical data to support what I'm going to say, based on interactions with individuals.
Well, that's all I could ask.
Right? Yeah. You would hear a lot of persons when you speak to them who live in these communities, who speak about being impoverished, not getting opportunities. I'm not saying job opportunities, just not getting opportunities, and being stigmatized of where they are.
Yes.
It's difficult for those individuals in their space, right? And what is happening, I do not believe that many of these persons in these communities are all bad apples, right? Sorry, may use Trinidad language. right? We can't use bad apples in Trinidad and Tobago. Bad mangoes or bad...
We understand bad apples. We understand bad apples. So I would hope, oh gosh, not everything literally has to be local.
Understand? So
I mean, tell me, which foreign country owns the phrase bad apples? Which culture owns it? You know? All right.
Yeah. So it is, but we tend to isolate these communities and stereotype them. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you are now allowing or putting the younger ones who grew up in this community. That is all they know. So then, if that is all they know, how do we show them something else different? And this is where we have the situation where police service does the hard and the soft approach.
Yeah.
Sometimes our soft approach is not given or not being seen as policing. But that is policing. Even over the week, with all these exercises, which I have been physically on and supervising, when you are stopping drivers and informing them about the checks, the road checks and all, you would realize that the number of persons who have minor infractions that they thought was not, that it was just minor. Simple. Some people leave their insurance home. They forget the insurance, it expires. Some persons might be able to drive in without their driver's permit and believe officer will just forget it. Simple things that they believe.
I mean, it happens, but I don't expect to be excused.
Good. What I'm saying is that when these things are happening, the more we accept in the society as this is part of our society, it becomes a norm.
Yeah. I'll say this. I have forgotten my wallet at home, not often, but enough that I could say it happens, but I don't understand forgetting your insurance at home.
Also,
why does that leave the car? Is someone going to steal it?
Also, part of our drive is educating persons in terms of the laws as well as some of the ills of society. We have to do certain, that is where policing is.
I mean, but I would argue that government should bear more of that burden, similar to building a database. But other aspects of government,
they have their role, but in order for us to get the communities supporting the police, they have to see us
doing
as part of a community.
True.
Has to see us as human beings, has to see us as willing and wanting to work with you all, because they have challenges in that community that we are not living in that community, so we might say we're just there for a few hours.
But
once you're living in there, it's difficult.
One thing I want to point out is one of the things maybe that we're now being clued into, and we kind of have to extrapolate data from other countries because it might not be as simple to extrapolate data from us, is the fact that the income levels relative to the cost of living, and we're not talking because there's cable and cell phones and internet packages now, so cost of living on top, but rather the cost to buy a house, the cost to buy a car, relative to the income level now has exceeded. It has not, the raises in income across the board have not necessarily kept up with the cost of living for basic things across the board. It's just harder to do things. And I think that goes back to, it's not just job opportunities which are harder. You can't become a manager with just O-levels or supervisor with just O-levels anymore, right? And everybody has these credentials and everybody's going after the same jobs. But to some extent, that was always the case, for the last 50 years. But there's also the fact that, look, the opportunities for your life to advance and to build a life is harder. They're seeing that in the States right now. It's just one more thing that's kind of piling on and making life for the people from lower income communities even harder than it was before. That could be part of the explanation why the violence is exploding. But I want to go back to something that I said earlier, because it's all well and good. We can acknowledge all of these things. But as you pointed out, these fixes are long-term fixes. We could try to solve these things for the 9-year-olds now of today, the 10-year-olds of today, maybe even the 13-year-olds of today, maybe even the 15-year-olds of today. But the 20 to 28-year-olds, mommy and daddy ain't gonna be able to send them to their room without supper because they shot somebody. That's not gonna,
no.
And we're gonna still need the soft but also the hard approach, and therein lies the trick, because the communities don't always accept the hard approach.
So there was an article where, and there was an incident where a parent, and that's extremely commendable on that parent, and
yes.
that is parenting.
That's one of the other stories I want to, yes.
Where
yes.
she would have identified that her son came home with items or clothing that does not belong to him.
Yes, she didn't buy it. And
she didn't buy it.
She knows his money.
Right. And she reported, she went to the police.
Well, she took him, right?
She carried him to the police station.
Carried him to the police,
yes.
and said, my son did a crime.
And
deal with him.
She's of the opinion that this was not whatever, how she brought it across.
Yeah.
And she made the hard decision as a parent. He may not accept it now, but in the future, he would understand that that was a decision that she had to make.
Consequences.
Because consequences for your action, and because of how she has been brought up her child, she insisted, and this is what I'm saying. If that parent would have accepted that and never asked the question, just like many of the parents in some of those in our society.
You've spoken about this before.
Right?
You don't question how your son bought you a new fridge, how your son bought you a new car, and then what he stashed in your attic or your basement or your closet.
Yes. So we know that, and you cannot tell me in this current age, whether you say you're a good, bad, or indifferent parent, if you are living in a household with your child does not have a fixed income employment, does not have a business. Every single day he's lying on the block and party. But he always has money, and he always have, then something is not adding up. Mm-hmm. It is not adding up. And you're here, and don't tell me you're not hearing that they are involved in certain things, and he's lying with a particular crew. So if you accept those type of things, consequences are also, you have to accept the consequences also.
And then I think what you were getting to, maybe I'll cut you off, was the mother kind of stopped it when it was small. When he reaches 29 or 25 with a gun,
she can't do anything more.
Then the bitter medicine is not you taking your son for robbery. It's you maybe having to accept, which some parents have to their credit, my child was involved in the wrong thing, and he led a life that will get him killed. And the police might just happen to be the ones to kill him, or it could have been other gangsters.
And so true. So I just want to make it absolutely clear.
Yeah.
I am not blaming the mother.
No, she did the right thing.
So I'm not saying all mothers are bad.
Yes.
So I just want to make it absolutely clear. I'm not saying that, or all parents are bad. I am simply just saying that parenting on the whole takes a little more than what we believe. The child, you are minding a child at a particular age, and this thing where you say you make a child and don't make a mind, I don't support that. I don't support that at all. As a parent, there is a limit to which you can guide your child. Once they can make decisions, and once they make decisions, there are consequences, both positive and negative, for the decision making. So by saying you're not making that you don't make their mind, it means that they're making their decisions. But if every time they make a decision, you are continuously saying the decision that they're making, you're not so always giving an excuse why they should make it. Let that person, they made the decision, good, bad, indifferent decision, and that is where parenting should be. And that is why I'm saying that when your child goes to school and we have exams, the child may not have succeeded with your first choice. They made a second choice. How your decision to treat the child going forward depends a lot on that child's future, because that child will now say, if I don't get first, or I don't be successful now, this is how I understand how my parents would treat me, and so we go forward.
I actually do wonder if academic results are even, particularly with younger children, less important than how they are brought up and how they are acclimatized, like to approach life, to think about things, right? I actually do think it's easy to get a paper and still be, on the basis of society, a bit of a rare end or an idiot, right? And the reason why I say that is you can get academic success and still be something of an idiot. Exactly. I think it's about exposing your child to things and teaching them how to make the critically think. There's so much things that will help, because I have friends who they didn't get to the big schools and they didn't, but somehow they were able to expand their own horizons through various experiences, and their intelligence is they're able to express it and to exercise it, as opposed to others who kind of just limited, in part because they limited themselves or their parents limited them.
There's a lot that has to be done, but everybody has a part to play within that. Yeah. And I continue to say that, yes, one part is in the home, one part is in the school, one part is in society. We are part of society, and what we accept in society and accept as a norm in society, then the children of tomorrow who comes into that society will continue to behave in that society because it's acceptable in that society, right? And this is what we don't understand. You just cannot change it immediately. It will take some time because we have to, there's acceptable behavior. Acceptable behavior now is a cell phone from everyone is on a cell phone walking the streets. That's acceptable behavior because of the connectivity of information and the information age.
Cell phones were not necessarily this expensive when I was growing up.
No.
And it was not a thing for kids.
Right. So,
but now it is.
But because it's part of...
It used to be too expensive.
So it is part of the culture of Trinidad and Tobago and the culture of the world, information. And the availability of information at your fingertips. That is part of society. The use of drugs has always been part of society, right? Alcohol for that.
Even more so, yeah.
So more so alcohol with combinations of other different type of drugs coming together. So we have multiple things happening when it comes to society. And children are now exposed to multiple issues. So it is not about, parenting is not only about that, but parental support. And the unfortunate, I just want to say condolences to the parents of the child who lost their life over the weekend. The toddler who drowned in the Port of Spain area. Again, the child would have been in a pool, a blown up pool, together with other children that were playing. Unfortunately, the child probably would have fell in as a toddler and succumbed to the, and she eventually drowned, went to, right? So
I think we take it for granted
that
how easy those things could happen.
That alone speaks volumes, right? And I don't want to dwell on the negative of this child, but it's history.
Yeah.
We have evidence that these type of things happen. And already children lost their life in this manner.
Yeah.
So it's something that we have to keep understanding that children, toddlers and all the way up, there are different levels of parenting going up the line.
Something that happened in Tobago, and I remember I used to give families basically a warning: don't take it for granted with your children. And I actually ended up giving that warning to family members of the deceased child, which was a surreal experience. I think I was somewhat embarrassed, but at the same time, I think they were somewhat appreciative of someone, showing random, because I didn't know who they were, a family, some sort of consideration, say, please be careful with regards to this, because it can happen. And it is unfortunate every time that does happen. We'll open up the phone lines now. It's way too late to take the break. We'll open the phone lines. I just want to say that it comes back to what Keaton Shaw, our colleague, always says. At the end of the day, far too often people are not equipped to be parents, are parents. And I don't know if that's something to say about our society. Why is it that we have children trying to raise children, and not all of the children raising children are actually chronologically children? Some of them are adults who are just not equipped to deal with this sort of situation, because I guess you could say more and more now the demands of parenting in some ways are greater than they were before. In other ways they're not. It's always been hard. It's always been hard. But the lessons or the consequences now maybe might be different, might be more severe. You know, back in the day, bad parents could lead to, you know, not all children grew to adulthood. It was a different dynamic in medieval times, in Renaissance times even, and of course times before that. So it's difficult to say, well, things were better or things were worse, we improved or we didn't improve. But I do think now that, I guess there's something about maybe coming out of the 50s. I don't know if the experience of World War II and World War I kind of gave certain generations a different perspective about life, and we don't have that perspective. We don't know what we're losing, whereas they lost so much. They were fully well aware of what it is that they lost and how to cherish what they still had.
So it's a lot. It's a lot for parenting, and as I said just now, parenting cannot be used loosely, right? There are principles of being a parent and a good parent. We can all understand how to be a good parent and a supportive parent, but you need to know how to be a good parent and a supportive parent and guide your child within your competence and experience, right? And in different areas where you live, the environment you live, you can determine how, you have to determine what level of responsibilities, what level of, what you can afford your child and what you can afford your child to do, where you afford your child to go, or where you can allow your child to go. You the parent have to understand that, and that is what parenting is about. Because not everyone is living in the same space. We may be living in Trinidad and Tobago, but in Trinidad and Tobago we have different cultures, we have different environments that we live, and each of the environment brings forth a lot of different challenges for parents.
I just want to join in. You could feel free to interrupt us. I know we're having a long-form conversation here, but call in and have your say, because I am interested with regards to people calling in with this topic in particular, because in the long run, this is one of the areas where it might not seem as though this is you playing your part with regards to crime in TNT, but it is, whether we want to admit it or not. As much as I criticize the Prime Minister for limiting his statements to some degree on it starts at home. I don't know if it starts at home, but home is a big factor, right? It might not necessarily start at home, but home could be where you interrupt that pattern of behavior. It could come from outside. It could come from the guy on the block, but it's still up to the parent now. And I guess part of it, one of the things that came up, so maybe I'll take the chance to ask you about it. It's one thing if my child is kind of going off of the straight and narrow from his own silly motivations or ideas. Ooh, I want to have a new shoe, so I'll steal it, right? That's kind of easy enough for a parent to deal with once you have the moral gumption to say, let's go to the police station and you'll kind of face the consequences of stealing. Don't think I'm going to cover for you just because you're my child. I'm going to let you start making a series of wrong decisions. This is where it starts. I'm going to nip it in the bud. But what about when, well, the guy on the block whispers in the child ear, he coming home every day. He wearing kind of cheap shoes and cheap clothes all the time because the family don't have money. And the parents are all trying to do the right thing. But you have somebody on the block whispering in the ear, hey, you want to wear those new Jordans? Hey, you want to get those new brand name clothes? Whatever the new, there's a whole set of new brands for backpacks and all kind of crap. Hey, you want Prime? Like, whatever it is, right? And there's going to be temptations on the child out there because he has to face the world without his parents, at least between school, when school opens and school closes, right? So there's always that there, and that's not so easy because I could appreciate that parents are going to be living in fear. We do have Move on the line, so before we get your comments. Move on, good morning. You're on the air.
morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Sir.
Are you hearing me clearly, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, you said something just now and I want to fully endorse it. While we can say that the first area of influence on a child comes from parenting, we have to also acknowledge the fact that all adults that come into a child's space are responsible for that child's upbringing. When you have leaders who come on TV and say things and tell untruths and act like a bully, children are watching. Okay? When you have vehicles driving up and down the road with loud music and with lyrics that would make a grown woman cringe, all those things we have influence. You know, so yes, it starts with the parents, but it's everything. It's teachers. I have had experience with teachers saying certain things that I don't think, you know, making racial statements and stuff like that. You know what I mean? All these things affect children. And we as adults, it is an adult thing. It's not just a parenting. It is an adult thing. Adults have to ensure that they do what is right, what is proper, especially when children are around. Sean, when I was a little fella, I remember I would be walking the road, and not much walking in the road. I might be just heading to school or somewhere. And I would see two gentlemen speaking. And I experienced it many times as a child. And they would use obscene language, and when they see, look a child coming, look a child coming. When did that change? Who changed that? You know, we are not, I keep saying, you know, we are not an honest people. Right? We are not an honest people. We talk a lot, and you know who are some of the most dishonest people in this country, Sean? Our educated elite. And right now I find they are strangely silent. This country is in the worst state I have ever seen it to be, and I'm 70 years old. And they are too silent, Sean. Over and out.
Thank you, caller. I'll say this. I won't be surprised if way back in the day there was racism by teachers. Right? Because I think certain generations were just insensitive.
There might be.
But now, I'll be shocked if that's happening now.
No. One of the things that the caller indicated as a very simple thing, I can remember when I was going to school, primary school, if you come home, they check your bag. If there's a strange pencil, a strange book in your bag, make sure by the time you go back in school tomorrow,
or
you make sure you hand it back in.
Or if something is missing.
Well, that too. So that level, and I see that is what I'm saying, once you set the standard, it is dependent on your standard.
We have Sugar on us on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning, sir.
Your first caller hit the nail on the head. Children follow what they see, not what you see. Right? They look at what you do. And the difference between when I grew up as a boy, the people who led the charge was the government. The government enforced all the laws. Today, if you look around the place, there is no government agency who make a comprehensive effort to enforce the law. If you listen to them, all find a reason not to enforce the law. I always talk about crime, and I always say it is the environment. If we do not enforce the planning laws and all these things, you end up with an environment that is encouraging crime. I went into how the gang started in East Dry River, and when government put the exercise to deal with it, and they got rid of the slums by buying all the people building. They leave the buildings there, and if you go now, you could still see. And those are the things that breed crime. Any call, gentlemen, or as usual, when you hang up, you make your controversial statement.
No, well, it's not in disagreement, so it's easier to clear the line. I actually do have a question for the ASP, but I agree with everything that you said there. That children follow what they see, not what you say. And then, to me, it goes on to the fact that how many people do observe, not just children, but young people, young adults. They do observe those things. They do observe, well, so-and-so breaking the law, you know, so anybody, you know, it's open season. Why not? You know, why do I have to walk the straight and narrow when the government is breaking its own laws? But thank you, Professor. I do, it's not so much I have a statement to make or even a comment to make towards you. There's something I want to ask the ESP. So I'll thank you for that call there, because the follow-up isn't directed to you. But hopefully you appreciate this. To what extent do you get that excuse? Because it's something of a cliche that we kind of take for granted. But to some extent, I think there's truth in it, because it's going to be so widespread that it's going to chip away at our perception of law and order. Because even kids, to some extent, they do see it. So everybody corrupt. And then once you start to think that the entire government is corrupt, that all of these regulations are not being seen about, every boy and girl that goes to get their driver's test, how many of them get the same old story where you got to give the license officer something to get your license, right? And that's where we start.
And that is the challenge we continue to face, and I will say it and repeat it again. Society is how society treats with certain things.
Well, it's like what you call said, adults.
And society has and if we accept those type of things in society, it becomes the norm.
Yeah.
And once it becomes the norm, it becomes acceptable, and nobody questions it. So when we stop persons,
that's the thing. We might not question it, but we do complain about it, and it affects our perception. I would argue, right? We know it's wrong. We complain that it's wrong, but then we don't do nothing about it.
Exactly.
We have to be on the line. Good morning, caller. On the air.
Hey, good day, Sean.
Morning.
And to your guest there. Very powerful conversation. I came in midway, but I heard the two comments by those two callers, and I want to agree with them 100%, especially with the caller that spoke about the educated classes. You know, Franz Fanon said, and this is just quote, the unpreparedness of the educated classes, the lack of practical links between them and the mass of the people, their laziness, and let it be said, their cowardice at the decisive moment of the struggle will give rise to tragic mishaps. Right? That's what Franz Fanon had to say about the educated classes. So I agree with that caller that said that where are they? Where are their voices? Where are their suggestions and so forth and so forth? Many simply recoil behind what material gains their education have brought them. Hopefully, what they're doing is shielding or attempting to shield their children from society behind gated walls and private schools and things of that nature, where their feet really don't touch the ground of society. You know, so they really grow up in that same stead. But everyone is absolutely correct. It takes a village. It still takes a village. So whether the village is actually socializing the child in the right road or not, if they're not, then they're actually desocializing the child, because the child is still going to interact with society. And what they see around them, what they hear from their leaders, I often complain about that. When you have your prime minister telling this other guy, meet me outside and things of this nature, and this is all over the papers, children interact with that. Children see that, and they read that, and maybe they don't really maybe talk about it amongst themselves, but it goes inside of them, and it kind of informs them from within. That's how the village is desocializing the child as the child interacts with persons that no longer care about the fact that they're children, right? When the child is coming into view, I go through Scarborough, and you have school children walking there, and men just way-laced, drunk, pissing against walls, cussing up a storm, all sorts of things. Children are right there, and it's like they're invisible. That goes inside the child, and it's helping to desocialize the child. That's what the village is actually doing today. No longer socializing the child, but desocializing them, making them just into what we're actually seeing now, right? As Malcolm X said, you know, the chickens will ultimately come home to roost. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, caller. I'd like to, to agree with that because I know that young professionals, youth parliamentarians, none of them want to be involved in politics. None of them want to be involved. They don't even want to be involved. They're in the gated community. This is to tell you the mindset. They don't want to be involved in running the gated community. So what happens is, I know this for a fact, you get the stories abroad, it's the homeowners association, locally it's the gated community. The bad apples who want to lord this little bit of power over their neighbors goes up for posts in the leadership of these communities to manage the budget, to make the decisions. Because the good ones who are actually qualified and they know what they're doing, they're too busy with their own lives. The bad apples, they don't have anything going on for them, so they want to feel in charge, right? It happens too often. And the same thing is happening in politics. The same thing is happening in politics. And the educated classes, to some extent, they're too disconnected, I would argue, right? Which is why we get what we get. But you're a police officer. You might notice this more than me. I feel both amazed and uncomfortable by the widely different living conditions our citizens live in. Because it's one thing if it's different due to economics or cultural traditions. That's understandable, right? I'm not East Indian, you're not half Chinese, we're not going to have the same traditions, right? I don't even have much Chinese traditions, to be honest. But obviously, Chinese Thai cooking is going to be a bit more the norm in my household than any sort of East Indian cooking with curry and what have you, right? We could still try to assimilate and be involved, but it's not going to be the same. That's one thing. But what I see, the difference in living conditions goes beyond those things. Goes beyond just some people are richer, some people are poorer. The living conditions of various communities compared to the richer communities. And this is all, you could just look at Port of Spain, where you see this. And the starkness is striking. And I don't know if you might have maybe borne witness even more than I did, given the fact that as a police officer, you would have gone on police exercises maybe in some of these communities.
It's sad without even, it's sad, but I don't want to identify any specific community at this point in time. But when you see so many areas that you would go in, you really question whether or not, what could parents in those communities really show their children a different life, because it's difficult for them in one aspect of it, because they are struggling to make ends meet, and they are struggling and not because in these communities that they would have cell phones, they would have direct TV,
big screen TV.
I am saying if they feel that that is what they need to be a little comfortable and and that is their choice.
Yeah.
It is not taking away anything from them, because they want to make a different life for their children for the future, no matter where they live. But we look at it but it is challenging because they already feel isolated and feel that they are being treated negatively.
And going back to Tobago's point, do you think there's a lot of people in these high affluent areas, and maybe even some of the politicians themselves, that really don't understand what life is like in these communities? Because that's the impression that I get. Like, out of sight, out of mind. It's not bothering me, so I don't need to deal with it.
And that is what the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service faces on a regular basis. We are at the ground level, literally on the ground level with respect to that, going into these communities and engaging in these communities. And we engage in different communities, so across the board. And different type of engagements in different communities have different responses. But we tend to get a lot of negative responses, more conflicts when we go to these type of communities, because they see us as the authoritative figure or the figure that represents the state and have them in this condition.
But they also don't necessarily trust your solutions.
It's not always the best solution. And there are a lot of the communities that would have supported us, and we support them with our community groups and our other programs that we have running with them.
Yeah, but I wanted to close, because you see this also internationally with areas of conflict. You don't always trust the solution because they live there and you don't, and they have to live with the solution and the consequences of it. So it even happens, I think, in crime hotspots. And I was alluding to earlier, some parents, you know, it's one thing to confront your child. It's the next thing to confront the gang leader who is trying to influence your child. How do you stop that? That's not so simple.
No, it's not as simple. Right? It's not a simple process.
So I get it. You know, the police could come in, but unless the police are going to be there 24/7.
Yes, and that in itself is a different conversation, because sustainability and the amount of resources in these areas, to dedicate the resources to get the desired results that we expect or we are anticipating, takes another level of effort in this area.
Well, folks, we are over time, so we have to end that there, especially since we don't have a break. I want to thank all our callers for calling in, for contributing to the conversation. Some good points all around. I want to thank ASP Ali for joining me once again. I don't know if you expected to have to go so deep on one topic, but we hit a lot of it here.
But it's very interesting, and it's a real topic because it affects everyone and equally across the board.
You might not see it.
Parenting and parental control and how we raise our children today is how we will look to see what our future will look like for tomorrow.
Well, folks, with that said, today is a good day to have a good day. As my colleague, Mr. Shah, would always say, remember your allegiance to the Republic. Stay safe out there. Be mindful about the rising dengue cases. And with that, we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing at wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we cannot a stalemate.
We'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man who's being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man
is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Young at heart, purpose-driven, patriot even. When you like to party, but are still passionate about discussing important issues, the only place where your needs will be met is WESN Content Capital.
In this fight, which is never over. Of course, I'm very hopeful, and I do think we're going to reach a real milestone with what's been done in sport in France, especially if sport and the international sporting community leaves Paris with a backpack full of wonderful ideas on how to boost gender equality. I think that the sporting community will also be able to spread the word in other countries, where talking about equality and the existence of women in society is even more necessary than it is here.
So, in your opinion, what are the major challenges that still lie ahead in seeking gender parity in Olympic sports?
For France, the challenges are pretty clear. Since the 2022 law on gender parity in sports leadership, we have still yet to negotiate that with the sporting community. The next step is to talk about rules of succession at the head of federations, saying that a man in the position must be followed by a female president, and vice versa. So I think that such a move is possible in the field of sport. Of course, there's also work to be done on the coaching community, and there is a very significant gap in France between the number of men and women who are coaches, and who therefore also become role models for the young girls who are participating in sports, and who can then imagine themselves in such a role later on. And here we still have some way to go. But I think we've understood the problem. It also has a lot to do with the protection of female athletes when they practice their sports. And during my 4 years at the ministry, we worked on this, and we're continuing to do so today, on the fight against sexual violence and abuse, and the harassment that female athletes continue to suffer.
Que les athlètes femmes subissent dans le champ du sport quand elles sont pratiquantes.
We're just going to take a pause there, because one common complaint about women's sportswear is that it is often way too revealing and skimpy. The US women's field and track team even making it known that they're not too impressed with their uniform for the Paris Olympics, reigniting concerns about sexism. So why is this still happening in 2024?
Ayodele Ikuesan is an Olympic sprinter, also a mother of two and 39 years old.
These leggings are really high-waisted so they don't fall down around the hips.
She's called time on being told what to wear. She wants to dress comfortably.
There's always been a certain pressure. People want female athletes to be super feminine, super sexy, pretty. And what we've always said is that we're sportswomen, so we're there to do sport, to perform.
But the kit suppliers have a hard time listening. When Nike unveiled the official Team USA kit for Paris 2024 last year, this extremely high-cut singlet for track and field raised eyebrows. Sprinter Lauren Fleshman reposted the kit on Instagram, labelled Patriarchy 2024.
Professional athletes should be able to compete without dedicating brain space to constant pube vigilance or the mental gymnastics of having every vulnerable piece of your body on display.
These sexualizing garments are part of a bigger problem, that women's sport should be about an aesthetic dictated by men.
Aucune étude scientifique de gestion, de management n'a démontré.
No scientific study has demonstrated that an outfit that exposes and hypersexualizes the female body attracts more spectators or TV audiences. But there is this idea that you need to give over an ultra-feminine identity that in the end is all about satisfying male desires and interests.
Qui correspond au fond surtout aux désirs et aux intérêts des hommes.
In 2021, the Norwegian beach handball team was slapped with a €1,500 fine for wearing shorts instead of the regulation bikini. Regulations have since changed, and athletes have pushed for further change. German gymnast Sarah Voss made waves when she broke from the traditional leotard to compete in a full-length bodysuit. Unfortunately, when you follow the money, sportswomen say attracting sponsorship is still much easier for those whose bodies correspond to what's in fashion in the magazines.
So as we see there, Roxana, sexism in women's sportswear is still very much a problem.
Yes, the subject of sportswear, whether they're too revealing or sometimes covering up too much, it's a real problem because, once again, it's women's outfits that are under discussion, and they're often under discussion in male circles. Women aren't the ones deciding how to dress or how not to dress. It's the people in the sporting federations, who are mostly men, who decide. Or else it's the sponsors, also companies run by male directors, and who decide on this or that outfit that the sportswomen are going to wear. I'm in favor of women taking their destiny into their own hands, including on the subject of clothing, listening to them, hearing their voices, and not those of men, who all too often turn women's outfits into political issues.
Another issue confronting the Olympics is that of transgender rights. It's caused much heated debate within the world of sports. For these games, international sporting federations have been asked to devise a new set of rules, which have prevented many transgender athletes from competing. Our team went to meet one of them.
BMX is her life. Chelsea Wolfe started riding at 6 years old. A passion that lifts her spirits.
It's fun. It's as if all the bad things happening in the world just melt away for a moment, at least until I land.
As a transgender teenager, Chelsea no longer felt safe at home in conservative Florida and decided to move to liberal California. But her transition with hormone replacement therapy has deeply affected her training.
It changes literally every fiber of your being, from mental to physical and emotional. I'm now 3 inches shorter than I used to be. I'm a shoe size and a half smaller, and my hands are smaller as well. There's a lot of weight gain that's associated with it, muscle loss, energy decreases, you lose the ability to recover after workouts. So the effects are extremely powerful, and being able to push through that wasn't something I was sure I would be able to do.
In 2021, Chelsea pursued her dream and attended the Tokyo Olympics as an alternate. Less than a year later, her career suddenly stopped when major international federations tightened rules for transgender athletes. Previously, trans women had to limit testosterone levels to compete in the female category, as seen with the pioneer Laurel Hubbard. Now, those who have gone through male puberty are banned, meaning Chelsea cannot qualify for the Paris Olympics. Neither can US swimmer Leah Thomas. Her case sparked heated debates after she won the highest college title in America in 2022. Many say fair play is at risk.
The category was created for females, for women, after masses of years and years of struggles to try and get the opportunities at the Olympics. When I went to my first Olympics, there were 4 men to every single female. We're nowhere near parity. You know, you look at how much male sports people earn. So, you know, I empathise and I would very much support their choices in life, but I still say that females are entitled to fair sport.
There's not enough scientific research that compare trans and cisgender women. In France, the sports ministry has asked experts to discuss the issue and come up with suggestions. Among them, athletes, doctors and sociologists.
Historically, contemporary sports trace back to late 19th century England with adult white men. Women had to fight to participate, and throughout the 20th century, indigenous people and individuals with disabilities or impairments also had to struggle to access elite sports. So perhaps today, transgender individuals are the emerging group that's forced to fight just to be accepted.
Some sports federations have suggested creating a new category for trans athletes, who make up less than 0.001% of Olympians.